A very warm welcome to all of you. We start now. Good evening, India. Good morning, America. Good afternoon, London, elsewhere. I'm so happy that people from all across time zones, from different geographies, are participating in this very important and timely discussion on the mutating world order, which is reflected in this shift or perceived shift from G7 to G11 sort of grouping. Ladies and gentlemen, it's enormously uplifting to see so many familiar faces in the audience. Friends who have found time to be with us. It's not possible to mention all of them, but let me identify some people. Denmark's ambassador to India, Vietnam's ambassador to India, Raja Mohan is joining from Singapore, many ambassadors, diplomats. Each person is special in his own way, so it won't be fair to single out some people. A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Manish Chand. I am founder and CEO of India Rights Network, an emerging think tank and media publishing platform focused on international affairs, the India story. We also publish India and the World, a magazine journal focused on international relations, which has carved its own niche among the strategic community of India. The Global Insights India TGII is a research arm of our organization and focuses on issues relating to Indo-Pacific, China, and emerging powers. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, let me welcome and introduce our outstanding speakers today briefly. They include some of our best minds, iconic names working in interlinked areas of diplomacy and strategic thinking. It's our special honor to host His Excellency, the Honorable Perry O'Farrell, Australia's High Commissioner to India. Welcome, Excellency.
Thank you.
Ambassador Kanwal Sipal, former Foreign Secretary of India, India's former ambassador to France, Russia, Turkey, and Egypt. Ambassador Richard Verma, Vice Chair and Partner, the Asia Group, and former US Ambassador to India. Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, India's former Ambassador, Italy, Thailand, and Poland, and former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. And of course, Gautam Bambawale, India's former Ambassador, China, Pakistan, and Bhutan. I will introduce them in detail when I ask them to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, now let me unpack the overarching theme of this webinar, lay the table as it were. We are meeting at a time of unprecedented crisis and geopolitical churn triggered by a rampaging pandemic that has killed near 1 million people and affected over 10 million people around the world. This virus is brutally egalitarian and is no respecter of national borders. It has also blurred the hierarchy of rich and poor nations. It's become a 3D world marked by death, despair, and devastation. In this 3D world, the only certainty is uncertainty. It's time to replace these 3Ds with 3Rs: reappraisal, rebuilding, and resurgence. This is what this webinar is all about: reappraisal, rebuilding, resurgence, where we are going, where we ought to be going. The theme of the seminar, from G7 to G11, unscrambling post-COVID geopolitical alphabet, is therefore appropriate and could be seen as a metaphor for a changing world order. Let me give you some background to this debate. On May 31, US President Donald Trump, in his vintage maverick style, responded to a growing impatience with the existing order of things by terming the G7 as a very outdated group and proposed that the G7 be expanded to include India, Australia, South Korea, and Russia in the grouping of the largest advanced economies. In a conversation with journalists aboard his special aircraft, Air Force One, President Trump suggested that the G7 should be expanded and rechrist as G10 or G11 and proposed that the grouping holds an in-person meeting of leaders in September or November in the US this year. 2 days later, responding to President Trump's G1 proposal in a telephonic conversation on June 2nd, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi commended him, I quote, for his creative and far-sighted approach, acknowledging the fact that such an expanded forum would be in keeping with the emerging reality of the post-COVID world. Mr. Modi underlined that India would be happy to work with the United States and other countries to ensure the success of the proposed summit. All new invitees to G11, which sound almost like a cricket team, have welcomed the G10, G11 concept. Those who are termed outdated by President Trump are predictably peeved and have resented it. In many ways, the current G7, as argued by President Trump, looks like an anachronism, as they now account for less than a third of global GDP on a purchasing power parity basis and less than half on market exchange rates basis, according to the 2007 report of the accountancy firm Pricewaterhouse. The G7 countries, when constituted, accounted for close to 2/3 of global GDP. The 7 largest economies, E7 or emerging 7, comprising Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, and Turkey, by contrast, account for over a third of global GDP on PPP terms and over a quarter on MER basis. The G10 or 11 proposal has predictably generated intense debate in strategic academic circles about the rationality and viability of the new grouping, which is still an idea in progress. Today, this webinar, we ought to be asking ourselves, is G10-11 an opportunity to recast the world order and create a new multilateral body that can effectively address crises and challenges of the post-COVID world? Hopefully, this webinar will illuminate and clarify complex issues that underpin the idea of G10-11 and how such a grouping, if it comes to fruition, can be shaped to address emergent challenges of the post-COVID world. Ladies and gentlemen, the idea of changing the world...
The shelf below, that color thing. Yeah.
Is that okay? The idea of changing the world or the world order is a romantic, poetic, and revolutionary idea. We don't know how this geopolitical alphabet will be scrambled and unscrambled to create a new form, an idiom of a new world order. Let me end my opening remarks with the much-cited quatrain of Omar Khayyam in Rubaya. He says, "Our love, could thou and I with fate conspire to grasp this sorry scheme of things entire, would not we shatter it to bits and then remold it nearer to the heart's desire?" Can we create a world which is more in sync with the heart and not just the mind? This is important to bear in mind because it may sound like an emotional sort of spin, but we need to create a world with the heart.